Well, hello everyone and welcome to a very special edition of Trade Talk. Just a couple of days out from the Grand Final. I would say big dance, but I hate that phrase. Collingwood and Brisbane meeting as they did 20 years ago in the 2002 and 2003 deciders. Brisbane looking for their first premiership since that particular 2003 Grand Final. And Collingwood looking to win their third in the AFL era, 1990-2010, and they'd be hoping to add 2023 to that mantle as well. It promises to be a ripper. It's the first time since 2014 that the sides that finished first and second will meet each other in the Grand Final. That was Hawthorn and Sydney on that occasion. Collingwood and Brisbane this time around. Tom Happell alongside of me. It's going to be a cracker. We've got a lot to talk about, the Brownlow, the Norm Smith and a number of other things, but mouth-watering Grand Final.
Certainly does. Looking forward to dissecting the game and the great prelim finals that we saw as well on the weekend just gone. Two different styles, aren't they? Collingwood sort of the immovable object, if you like, with their defence, and Brisbane the unstoppable force with their offensive capabilities. So the two best teams all year, a fitting Grand Final, and I think it'll be a cracker. Really looking forward to it.
We're joined by Todd Davey from Stats Insider, who was about to retire to a Caribbean island somewhere after Lachie Neale won the Brownlow on Monday, but he's still with us for the time being. And Todd, we are set up for a belter, but how did you read the prelims? Obviously the Giants getting very close to pinching theirs.
Yeah, and very unlucky not to get there. And Carlton, after that red-hot start, who would have picked that? And Brisbane forced their way back. And really interesting late-breaking news. I'll get your thoughts from both of you that Billy Frampton's been named to play in this game. It's brought our probabilities in, which we'll touch on a bit later, but it looks like Craig McRae's ready to roll the dice on Billy Frampton.
First final of his career, that will be. Daniel McStay, the hard luck story, or one of them. Taylor Adams, another hard luck story. Played in the Grand Final a few years back, which they lost to West Coast, so he won't get that opportunity to win a premiership. And neither will Daniel McStay. It's going to be a very awkward Saturday for him. His old side, Brisbane, up against his new side, Collingwood, and he can't be there. But what do you make of that change, Tom?
Yeah, presumably it means John Noble will miss out again. So they're obviously opting for a tall option over that sort of dashing halfback flanker, which will be interesting on a hot day. I think 27, 28 degrees in Melbourne. So the big tall as opposed to the run and carry. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But the Pies, they're probably in need of another marking target.
Might discuss that weather too. I think the hottest Grand Final on record was 1987 between Hawthorn and Carlton. I think Hawthorn West Coast was pretty warm a few years back.
Certainly 2008. I know we're going.
Yeah, that one as well.
But Hawthorn, Geelong, that was near 30 as well. So we've had some hot Grand Finals, that's for sure.
You fancy the team from Queensland. We'll savour those conditions a little bit. We'll jump into a bit of rapid fire, which we've been playing most weeks. I'll kick it off first. A question we've asked in each week of the finals about sides that have been eliminated. Who goes better, Tom, in 2024, Carlton or GWS?
Tough one. I'll side with Carlton just. I think they don't have too many holes on their list for mine, and I think perhaps some outside class in the midfield is the one thing they're lacking, but their key pillars at either end of the ground are sorted with Curnow and Wiedering, and if you want to throw Mackay in there as well, although he's a bit up and down, isn't he, Harry? But certainly those two are the key pillars for Carlton, and they have enough inside ball-winning mids, Cripps, Walsh, Chera, Akers and Hewitt, so the list goes on there. And I think they'll be really buoyed by the fact that they now know their game translates to September, which in the past it hasn't. So I think they're primed to go again. And the Giants, no doubt, despite them having a great season, none of us saw it coming, but they no doubt overachieved, and it might be hard for them to replicate next season with a lot of sides knocking on the door. Yeah,
Adam Kingsley, Coach of the Year during the week as well. Hard to mount an argument with that. Todd, do you have a view on the immediate future of Carlton and GWS and who you'd rather be?
Yeah, I agree with Tom. I just think they need to have a clean bill of health. We saw what Sam Walsh is capable in that preliminary final. He was absolutely brilliant, and they missed him for large portions of the year. Get him healthy, get that list healthy, and the sky's the limit. I think they should be targeting a grand final appearance next year.
Yeah, if they can get a bit more out of Harry Mackay as well, alongside Charlie Curnow, who's been amazing. And then, Sam Walsh, probably their best midfielder in all three finals, you would think. The Brownlow medal, there's always a lot of talk after it about it being imperfect and some unusual voting activity and forwards and defenders not getting some love in. It's always been imperfect, and is that okay, Tom?
A really interesting topical discussion after Monday, but I think, there's no doubt it's always been a flawed award in my mind, and sort of whether that's okay or not is another matter altogether. But we'll touch on it later in the buy, hold and sell segment. But for mine, the Brownlow is and has never been a true representation of the league's best player. And I think it's probably fair to say that the umpires have a hard enough job as it is officiating the game to a high standard, and on top of that, they've got to do these votes as well and have the pressure associated with that. So I think, the Brownlow medal, it'll stay in its current format for sure. It's not going to change the umpires, deciding the Brownlow medal. But I think in terms of the medal itself, I think perhaps it probably holds less weight than it once did. Yeah,
great players win Brownlows, but plenty of great players haven't. And Todd, we saw on Monday night Lee Matthews do a presentation on the life of Ronald Dale Barassi, two of the most famous names in football, neither of which won a Brownlow medal, which says a bit that it's not necessarily the be-all and end-all. But what are your thoughts overall on the award?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It is a flawed system that they have, but it's the best system in my opinion. It's a very unique award, and AFL football, unlike the Coleman medal, it's an objective award. So no one's ever going to completely agree on it. And there was a lot of discussion during the week about whether or not they expose umpires to the statistics after the game. But a lot of people complain that we're too statistic heavy when we're talking about players. So it's an interesting discussion. I don't think there's a perfect way to address it. And why change it now? I think it's worked for however long the Brownlow's been in existence, and it'll be the way to award it going forward.
One for you, Tom. Does Brisbane's MCG record actually matter this week?
Yeah, interesting one. So Dane Zorko said on radio the other day that the MCG was quote just another oval. So I'm sure from Brisbane's perspective, that's the way they'll be looking at it. But it's a good attitude to have in theory, I think. But how they'll react on the day in front of 100,000 plus, that'll be another story altogether. But it's important to note that they had Melbourne on toast in round 18 at the MCG, leading by 3 goals at three-quarter time and with 5 minutes to go as well. So Jake Melksham became Superman there and got the Ds over the line. But overall, I don't think their record will matter on the day, and it'll just be one-off game of football. So.
Yeah, and the occasion as well probably trumps it too. And one for you, Todd. More important to their team's success on Saturday, Jordan De Goey or Joe Danaher?
Both great players, both capable of winning games off their own boot, but it's Joe Danaher for me. Did some statistics when you posed this question to me early in the day, Daz, and Joe Danaher's, when he's kicked 3 goals or more for Brisbane, they've won 7 out of 7 contests. So it's a huge stat in their favour. And even when he just kicks multiple goals, they're 16 of 18. So Danaher playing well usually correlates to goals and an impact in the forward line. And yeah, multiple goals leads to Brisbane wins. So I think it's Joe Danaher for me.
Do you concur, Tom?
Both big game players. Daz De Goey kicked 3 in his first grand final appearance in 2018 and was really influential there. Obviously, the Pies just got done by that Dom Sheed, fantastic goal from him. But Joe Danaher as well. I remember watching him in 2014 as a young 20-year-old kid kick 4 in an elimination final against North Melbourne. Lit up the joint in the MCG. So both players no stranger to the big stage, and I think they'll both play critical roles.
Wonder if the AFL umpires were trolling Collingwood by giving Dom Sheed 3 votes against them when they lost by 10 goals, almost to sort of remind them of his name. One for both of you. I'll start with you, Tom. Your favourite neutral grand final? I'm sure you'd say 96 and 99. So favourite neutral grand final?
96, I wasn't alive, unfortunately, Daz. And 99, I was one year old, so missed those. Looking forward to the day, though, that's for sure. I think you're going to mention 2012, but I would concur with that. I think that's a hard grand final to go past. Who can forget the bearded Malcho, Nick Malcheski, as Triple M were calling him throughout the day. Fantastic stuff, but that was a cracking grand final. I think also Hawthorn versus Geelong in 08, we mentioned that on the hot day. They're such underdogs, and it was a high-scoring, attacking, great game on the eye to watch. Cyril Rioli running around that day as a 19-year-old, laying some great chase-down tackles, and who can forget Stewie Dews left foot goal to basically seal it for the Hawks. And then last one I'll mention, in terms of a pure moment, I suppose, the Jeremy McGovern's intercept mark and then 30-metre bullet to, I think it was Nathan Vardy in the 2018 Grand Final against Collingwood to set up the Dom Sheed goal. I think that goes very underrated. So they'd be my couple. What about you, Daz?
Yeah, certainly 2012. I think that was an amazing game of footy. The momentum where Sydney were 5 goals up, then Hawthorn hit the front, and then Sydney came back over the top of them, and just all of the drama around that game and the rivalry that kick-started. You mentioned 2018. I think it was at Rioli with the mark almost sitting horizontal across a player's shoulders late, which sort of set up that play inside 50 for that last goal, which was oh so important in 2018. Todd, do you have a favourite neutral grand final post 2000, of course?
2010, not the replay, of course, Daz, sorry to do that to you, but the draw. I think it's one of the great travesties that St Kilda didn't win that game, because I think that Brendan Goddard mark would have gone down in folklore for AFL. That was one of the most incredible grand final moments I can remember, and unfortunately for the Saints, they didn't go on to win that one, but that was a terrific contest and went right down to the wire, and yeah, it's right up there. And that, just to mention too, the St Kilda game against Geelong 2009, that was a terrific contest too, and unfortunately, Daz, sorry to bring it up, but the Saints didn't win that one, but two of the best sides going at it, like we'll see on this Saturday.
Yeah, just to give an insight into how much it hurts to be a Saints fan, in the 2009 Grand Final, St Kilda the only team in history to win 3 consecutive quarters in a Grand Final and not win it, and the only team since 1984 to lead at 3-quarter time and get overrun in a Grand Final. So, and the first team to lay 100 tackles in any game of football and lose. So, painful.
Sounds like you're not bitter at all, Daz.
No, that was a very, very, very tough afternoon, and then to draw the following year just made it a little bit worse. Trade Talk medal, some tremendous performances, but pretty even across the board. Some of the honourable mentions I thought across the weekend. I thought Isaac Quainer only had 19 possessions, but I thought he played quite well for Collingwood, particularly when they were up against it in the first 3 quarters of the game. Sam Walsh gets a mention. I thought he was Carlton's best mid across the course of that game. I thought Oscar McInerney as well, 38 hit-outs and went forward and kicked 2 goals, played a pretty important role. And Josh Kelly was probably the Giants' second best midfielder on the day. But where did you settle for your votes?
Settled on one vote for a bit of a sort of left field candidate here, Daz, but Kid Coleman for the Brisbane Lions. He was crucial in their win against the Blues. He's a very useful playmaker off the wing half-back area, and he had 21 touches going at 85%. 10 marks, and sets up the play really well for Brisbane, and very underrated player. So he gets 2 votes. Tom Green, 1 goal and 30 disposals against the Pies on Friday night. Very, very hard to stop now, isn't he, in the midfield, becoming one of the game's elite, just very hard to tackle. And 3 votes hard to go past Jordan De Goey, 34 disposals, going at a very damaging 73%, 6 score involvements, and the best man on the ground in the Pies' run to the grand final.
In their run in the third quarter too, would have had 4 or 5 centre clearances in a row at a really crucial stage of the game. We'll start with that one on Friday night, 8-10 to 8-9, a low-scoring arm wrestle. Collingwood kicked 8 goals for the game. They kicked 5 of them in 12 minutes in the third quarter when they were very much up against it. The Giants missed a couple of chances early in the third where they could have gone 4 or more goals up. Toby Green had that late miracle banana from the boundary that was marked just inside the field of play by Steele's side bottom. You don't want to be too critical. You wonder whether, does he step inside and snap it on the left, or does he, go with that banana? Does he just try to score a point and level the scores? Look, he did the right thing by trying to win the game, but it's all of those things that I'm sure would be going through his head. But what did you make of it, Tom, Collingwood's 1-point escape?
Cracking game that lived up to our, I suppose, predictions of it being a close one. We said that last week, but the Giants had more contested and uncontested possessions. Collingwood won the clearances by 18, so that sort of balances that out. Inside 50s were basically even, 18 scoring shots to the Pies, 17 to the Giants. So basically by every measure, there's nothing between these two teams, and it was a genuine flip of the coin. De Goey, obviously, as we just mentioned, played to his absolute max. The Giants elected not to tag him in the end, which was probably proved to be a bit costly and the wrong call there. As you mentioned, a couple of moments that perhaps the Giants would like back with Callum Brown. I think he had a contest on the wing in the third quarter with 3 Giants teammates streaming forward, basically into an open goal. I won't say he didn't go hard enough, but he'd probably like to have that one again. And then Lockie Keefe as well. I think it was in the last quarter he elected to snap over his shoulder and not handball the ball to Toby Green at the top of the goal square, which was basically a lay-down misère goal for the Giants in waiting. So 2 little moments there, but Pies certainly, for mine, deserving of a grand final berth, been the best team all year along with the team who they meet this week. So, certainly no complaints there.
Very difficult to argue. Todd, what did you make of it? The Giants, I thought they were a goal away from being home midway through the third quarter, but Collingwood rallied.
Yeah, they did, and I thought the game of Dan McStay was really underrated. I think he'll be a big omission this week. But Sam Taylor was great once again. So there was no multiple goal kickers for Collingwood on the night, which it goes to show how great GWS's defence was throughout the game. But yeah, just to reiterate, McStay, he kicked the first goal of the match and then was pivotal at certain points. He didn't have a huge impact. He only had the 5 disposals, but 2 goals on the night was a big impact for him. And now it's up to Billy Frampton to fill that role. But as you guys mentioned, GWS were terrific and really unlucky not to get there. Steve Coniglio, again, one of the better players for the final series for GWS after missing that opening elimination final. He was great, I thought, and he delivered 25 disposals and 4 tackles. He was great on the night. But Toby Green, I think he'll be thinking about that shot at goal for the rest of his life, unfortunately. And yeah, 2 or 3 more metres on that banana kick, and they'd be in a grand final, and he'd be talked about as one of the great finals exponents the game's ever seen.
Yeah, I agree, Todd. I was just going to ask you, Daz. So in terms of, I suppose there's a big question marks over the umpiring on Friday night. The umpires putting the whistle away, as we've coined that phrase in the AFL. But what do you make of that? Do you think in professional sport, it doesn't seem like any other professional sporting organisation or competition, the umpires or the referees have that mechanism or they put the whistle away. I'm just wondering, do you think that's something that I suppose should be accepted in our game?
Look, it's one of those ones that's kind of an unspoken thing where they do umpire finals differently. They clearly have. The numbers in terms of average free kicks per game are down across finals. And look, I get the concept of it, and I get that you don't want it to be whistle happy. You can have too many free kicks paid in a game, but rules are always rules. It kind of reminds me of one of the sillier phrases you ever hear in a game where they're like, you can't pay that inside 50. And like, well, the rule doesn't stop in a certain section of the ground. Like if someone's caught high or it's holding the ball 15 metres from goal, you don't not pay it because of where it is and the price that it would pay and the time and the stakes of the game. I mean, look, there are a couple where it wasn't just putting the whistle away, it was just a blatant mistake. So the Toby Green high tackle and the trip on, I think it was Josh Kelly. And
the Dacos in the back against Daniels, which subsequently meant he went off with the HIA. But I certainly agree with you there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple that were just mistakes that we can't put down to putting the whistle away. But yeah, the rules are always the rules. Brisbane Carlton, amazing start for Carlton. Couldn't have been any better. They were 5 goals up, and it felt a bit like when the Bulldogs went to Adelaide and smashed Port a couple of years ago out of nowhere in a prelim. But Brisbane steady. The Hipwood goal just before quarter time was really important, and then they really dominated from that point on. They could have won the game by a bit more than they did. They were clearly the better side after quarter time, but Carlton showed quite a bit of cheek, and we'll take a bit out of that. But yeah, certainly for more than half an hour, they would have dared to dream, I think, Tom.
Yeah, they were out of the gates like a train, 5 goals to 0, as you mentioned, and the Blues fans must have been nearly booking their tickets for Grand Final day. But not much to add. I think the difference in the end was Brisbane's guns outplaying Carlton's their counterparts, I suppose. So Cripps 13 disposals, Curnow just 8 touches and a goal, Akers 18 disposals versus Dunkley 25, Neal 23, and Danaher 2 goals from 15 touches. So I think that's sort of the way it swung in the end, just with Brisbane's gun players stepping up in the end. And yeah, the Lions go an entire season undefeated at home. So like Collingwood, as we just mentioned, very deserving of their participation in the grand final. And I think they'll go in with some confidence this week.
Todd?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the guns stood up, but I really like the games of those lesser lights. We mentioned Kitty Coleman off the top, but Lincoln McCarthy, former Geelong player, he's brilliant. 18 disposals, 2 goals, 7 tackles. One of the better rated players on the ground. And it's guys like him who have to step up on grand final day, but they're showed in that preliminary final they're up to the challenge. And between him, Oscar McInerney and Kitty Coleman, as we mentioned, they've got some good B-grade players that are ready to step up and have an impact.
Going to circle back around now. I went through some of the rapid fires earlier in the piece. Before we preview the grand final, we're going to flick it over to Tom for some of your burning questions that came out of the weekend.
Sure, let's just flick them up. Hang on. All right, so everyone has their opinion on North Melbourne's assistance package that was announced earlier in the week. What is your thoughts on that?
I guess it's never going to make anyone happy, because to give one side assistance, it stands to reason that you have to hurt other clubs' draft position. So clearly, you back self-interest in that situation, and clubs are going to look at it and go, well, what does this do for us? And the counter-argument is always that a team will often get itself into trouble self-inflicted, such as the clearing out players that North did in 2016. But there's no doubt about it. And if you look at some of the commentary around it, so Geelong have been one with Chris Scott, who was outspoken about it. Played for Brisbane, they received assistance packages during his time there. Coaches Geelong, who have benefited from the father-son rule.
Their own boutique stadium.
Yeah, their own boutique stadium. Ross Lyon, who coaches my Saints, St Kilda, have had priority picks in the past. And if you look at it, I think someone made a point that in the period of time when North Melbourne have won, I think it's 18 games, St Kilda have won 37, Geelong have won 51. So it's a massive difference between, say, St Kilda, who have been a middle-of-the-road team, not even a particularly good side over that period, and a team like North. So I think, look, something has to be done, and the AFL's all about equalisation. I think North are tracking along okay, but it's not happening at the rate that it should. So, I think that if you look at it across the board, most sides in the competition somewhere along the line have benefited from something. So I'm okay with it.
Daz, a headline you'll see this off-season?
Another stadium upgrade at Cardinia Park, probably. It's been a good couple of months since I had one of those, but I'd probably expect something like that. And maybe Gill finally departs. I'm not saying that he needs to. He retired 14 years ago, so I think we'll see one of those too.
Daz, last one. Are Brisbane more likely to win by a big score in the grand final than Collingwood are?
Probably on basis of firepower. So it doesn't mean necessarily more likely to win, but they're the team more likely to kick 15, 16 goals potentially. So, if Brisbane get it on their terms, they're more likely to win big.
And lastly, Todd, I'll just throw to you quickly. The AFL should bring back capacity standing room at the MCG so we can see it fully packed, 120,000, 115, 120,000, as opposed to just 100,000.
Absolutely, no-brainer that one. We want to see the big crowds, and we want to see crowds get broken routinely. And this one, with all the Collingwood fans dying to get in, would almost go close to breaking one of those records. So let's fill out the capacity. Let's bring them all in.
Agree with that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we had the anniversary yesterday of the 1970 Grand Final, which was the biggest crowd ever, 121,000. We look to the Grand Final, so top two sides in action. Brisbane have probably been, I know the Giants and Carlton went on a good run of form. Brisbane have probably been the best side over the last, say, 2 months overall on form. Collingwood have been the best side over the entirety of the season. It's very much a worthy Grand Final with these two sides in it. You've got Collingwood, who very difficult to score against, very well structured, extremely well coached, against a Brisbane side that is full of match winners, full of height and speed and skill and firepower. So it really comes down to, for mine, the side that can restrict versus the side that can do a lot of damage, and which one of those two comes out on top, Tom?
Yeah, it has the makings of a classic Grand Final. I think, sort of from my perspective, I think that high scoring and the ability to score in quick succession and pile on the goals trumps a stingy defence. I just think, there's lapses in defence as always, and there's always abilities to break a team down, whereas, teams who stagnate in offence, that's often the killer. So I think the Lions are held in good regard there. So Brisbane have won the last 6 outings versus the Pies, which will also give them a lot of confidence, particularly the last 2 times that they've met this season. Brisbane kicked massive scores, 116 points and 124 points respectively, against that Collingwood defence we just talked about. So that's why I think that gives Brisbane the slight edge. Brisbane have 6 players who have kicked 20 plus goals this season who are playing on the weekend, while Collingwood have just 3. That taps into that scoring again there. And Collingwood will be out to atone for their 2018 loss with 9 players from that day lining up. And obviously Bobby Hill, an addition who played in the Giants, premiership or not premiership, grand final outfit of 2019. So that makes 10 players for Collingwood up against the Lions, who just have 3 players who have played in the grand final: Lachie Neale, Charlie Cameron, and one other,
Josh Dunkley,
of course. So certainly from that perspective, Collingwood have the experience on the big stage, and who knows how much that counts for. Collingwood's intercept marking game and drive off half back will go a long way to them winning. But my prediction, I think it'll either be a close Collingwood win or a 20-plus margin in favour of the Lions. I think if they can get a hold of them early, get a run on and silence the crowd, I think they'll be hard to stop. But conversely, if they miss opportunities and they keep the Pies in the game, then maybe later that'll tell the story. So.
Yeah, you sense Collingwood, that they keep coming. We know that's been a feature of them for a number of years. It's certainly under McRae, that whole era, their ability to chase games down and come from behind. Big tasks for Billy Frampton and Mason Cox, whether they can compete enough without McStay. I agree with Todd. He played an underrated game on Friday night. He gave them plenty in terms of a contest. I'll miss him. And then you throw into obviously Danaher and Hipwood, who have more natural match-winning capabilities at the other end. So can Collingwood restrict them and then get the likes of Frampton and Cox to break even on influence? If they can do that, then they go a long way towards winning it. Midfield battle will be fascinating. Collingwood's clearance work is outstanding. Brisbane have got that run and carry and those guys that could just run forward in waves and kick goals like Bailey and Dunkley, who we mentioned. McCluggey just hit the scoreboard a lot this year, and Zorko. So, yeah, who can Collingwood restrict, or can Brisbane break through? If Brisbane break through, I don't think Collingwood have the scoring capacity. But can Brisbane stand up under the relentless pressure that Collingwood will put on them? It'll be fascinating. Todd, how are you splitting them?
So Stats Insider has Collingwood as the 55% probability of winning this one. It's a tough game to call though, and that the probabilities reflect that. As you guys mentioned, the big time players are going to be the ones that garner the most attention. I think there's 2 matchups at either end of the field. So Charlie Cameron up against Isaac Quaynor will be a huge matchup. Cameron obviously has the match-winning capabilities, and Quaynor's All-Australian. And at the other end, Starcevic versus Jamie Elliott. Elliott hasn't had the huge impact that you would have expected from him, but again, another match winner, one of the most clutch players in the AFL. So I think those are the 2 matchups that might fly under the radar going into the game, but could be decisive.
Absolutely. We'll get some final strategies in a moment. Buy, hold and sell. I'm buying our own Brownlow performance. We're obviously laying Nick Dacos all year and backing Lachie Neale, so credit to us on this program. Big Carl will get that mentioned too. He was the laying Nick Dacos king. And Big Joe Danaher, I get the feeling he'll have a pretty good day on Saturday. I think his influence in big games has been telling of late, and I think he holds the key in a lot of respects to what happens in this game. Tom, do you have a buy?
Continuing the North Melbourne theme a bit, Daz, so I'm buying Harley Reid to North Melbourne. I think this one's firmly on the cards after North's assistance package was announced during the week. They're armed with enough picks now to satisfy West Coast demands in a trade, and I don't think the AFL will want to see a repeat of Jason Horne-Francis's scenario from 2 years ago with an interstate #1 draft pick leaving after 1 season. So I think a deal could be beneficial for both parties there.
The other Jason Horne-Francis scenario I don't think they'd want to see, which is my sell, is mentioned earlier that the Brownlow is imperfect, and that's okay, but not when they get it this wrong. So Jason Horne-Francis in round 14 for Port Adelaide against Geelong, he had 13 possessions and 5 clangers. They won the game by 7 goals, Port Adelaide, so the winning side was going to get votes, but he was rated by Champion Data as the 40th best player on the ground out of 46 that played in that particular game. So I know he looks like Miles Bergman, but Miles Bergman had 5 touches in that game, so it can't have been a case of mistaken identity either. So I understand they're going to get a few wrong. You can't get it that wrong, how Jason Horne-Francis got 3 votes in that game. Your sell?
My sell, so continuing on the theme again, the discourse surrounding the Brownlow medal, as we touched on it off the top, it's always been an inconsistent award, and it will continue to be. That's just the way it is for years to come. So I'm not sure why the outrage has reared its head in this particular year. But yeah, I think in my view, the AFLPA Player of the Year award and the Coaches Award are more reflective of the true best player in the game.
Yep, I think that's very much a coveted award if you're rated by your peers. We'll wrap it up with a bit of a betting strategy in terms of likely winner and Norm Smith medalist. I think the game is 50-50, and for that reason, Brisbane at $2.18 and Collingwood at $1.83. I think in a 50-50 game, if you're getting better than those 50-50 odds, so I would be leaning Brisbane's way. I'll do my Norm Smiths after I throw around to you guys. I'll start with you, Todd. Do you have a winner and a Norm Smith?
Yes.
A couple of Norm Smith contenders, according to Stats Insider.
Yeah, absolutely. So our top three, Nick Dacos, 17.5% probability, Lachie Neale at 16.5%, and then De Goey 11.3% probability. And I'm going a Brisbane Grand Final win and a Lachie Neale, probably justified this time, Norm Smith medal.
And I think he would be the third Brisbane player to win a Brownlow and a flag in the same year, Ackermanis and Simon Black in 1 and 2. Yours, Tom?
Yeah, I think, so obviously $2.18, as you just mentioned, for the Lions probably does represent some value, but I don't think they're a back as such, but I'll be tipping the Lions to win, but no betting strategy there. I think in terms of the Norm Smith, I've got 3 at odds here, all at double figures, who I think if their teams win will figure highly in the voting. So Charlie Cameron at $28. He's kicked multiple goals against the Pies the last 4 times they've met, and I think he could get a hold of them if Brisbane get a run on. They don't have a natural matchup for Charlie Cameron with Isaac Quainer. I think Quainer's more of that drop-off intercept type. I'm not sure he's a great lockdown player, and that's what's going to be required on Charlie Cameron. Adam Sard actually did a good job on first half on Charlie Cameron last week, but then as Brisbane is typical with Brisbane, as they got their mojo and as they got their run on, Charlie got on top. So $28 about him in the Norm Smith medal, I think, is a good play. Joe Danaher, $30 in the Norm Smith medal market. I think similar to Cameron, I think he has the capacity to kick a bag in the grand final or in big finals, as he's shown. And $30 for me. That's overs. Next back will be Steele Sidebottom. So proven big game performer, a former Anzac Day medalist, and he's hitting form at the right time of the year. He's been in Collingwood's top disposal getters in the first few in their 2 finals this year, and I think at 40-1, I think he is another good play. So there'll be my 3 backs for the Norm Smith. And just lastly, one from left field, which be interested to get your thoughts on, but I've gone Connor McKenna to kick a goal at 460. Kicked a goal last week when the Lions were under pressure, and he's just that kind of player, I reckon, that can bob up in a grand final off a half back line. Might receive a handball or kick a running goal at some stage to lift the Lions. Just a bit of a hunch I've got, but 460 I think is worth a play there as well.
I like it. It feels like it happens a bit in grand finals, that some of those halfbacks push forward, and it feels like it's something that could definitely occur at a crucial stage of the game. I like particularly Danaher and Sidebottom in those picks for the Norm Smith. I could picture both of those. The other one I'll throw out of left field, I think, if Brisbane win, is Zach Bailey. He's had a pretty good year, but I get the feeling that he's one of those players that can out of nowhere kick 4 and have 25, and he produces numbers that are similar to, say, what a Shea Bolton produces at Richmond. And if Collingwood were to win the game, I'm fairly confident on Jordan De Goey, the way he's been playing at recent times. I know he's second favourite, but
do you have a price on?
$44 on Zach Bailey.
44. Okay.
So he's pretty good. But there's plenty of others that are good value. Jamie Elliott is 65s. I mean, he could kick a few and get him home. Brody Myercheck's 100-1. Another one that could have an influence in a low-scoring game. But Jordan De Goey, Collingwood, and Zach Bailey, Brisbane would be my 2 predictions on that front. And all of those tips, you can catch them on the Betfair app. Of course, the expert tips are now available, not just going on there to check the odds. You can get the expert tips straight into your pocket. So we'll hopefully strike with the same success that we were able to do on Brownlow night. So you can catch this and all of our content on the Betfair Hub and on the Betfair app. Enjoy the rest of Grand Final week. chances are you're about to lose. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.